welcome. Thank you for joining us on this edition of Stroke of Genius. So we have on with us today, we have Rosemarie Rossetti. Hey, good morning, Rosemarie.
Good morning, Brian.
How are you?
I'm doing well. Happy Friday to you.
Happy Friday to you. It's good, so good seeing you. So on this show, we talk about people with disabilities, and we also talk about how they want to understand or have other people understand, the caregivers, to understand what it is that they're going through. Because sometimes it's hard to explain that to caregivers and to get them to have a more empathetic perspective on life. So that's what we do here on this show, and I'm so glad you joined us. So without any further ado, I just want to jump right in if you're okay.
Sure, let's go.
Oh, all right, sounds good. So, Rosemarie, tell me a little bit about your story. And then when you start this, I'm going to go away for a little bit, and I'm going to do some stuff offline, and you can just go right ahead.
Well,
Thank
Brian,
you.
as you know, I'm in a wheelchair as a result of an injury. This was June 13th of 1998. It was our wedding anniversary. My husband Mark and I went for a bicycle ride on a beautiful Saturday afternoon. Um, while we were riding, suddenly a 7,000-pound tree fell on top of me and instantly paralyzed me from the waist down. It was a very life changing moment, a transition. I'm very lucky to be alive. I was life flighted from the bicycle trail to a helicopter port and had 4.5 hours of surgery to discover that I have a spinal cord injury. So I'm paraplegic. The injury, of course, was something to adjust to. My entire life was turned upside down. My marriage was only 3 years old. We had a new home that was not accessible. I had a business as a speaker and a trainer and a writer and a consultant and a publisher, and everything had to change. I had to resolve myself to physical therapy for 2 more years, going 3 days a week. My home was not going to work, so Mark and I had to discuss, are we moving? Are we remodeling? Are we building? What are we doing to make life easier? As things progressed, I was hoping that the wheelchair would not be a part of my mobility, but unfortunately it is. And the house was very difficult to live in, intensifying my disability. So those are, I guess, the highlights of my story, and that life has changed in an instant. It's been 22 years now, and readjusting along the way, and having a wonderful husband who became my full-time caregiver. Little did he know when we got married on June 10th of 95 that he would have this responsibility in a whole new world that he's had to face in a whole new environment.
So, how did you do that? I mean, how did he do that? Really? I mean, that's the question. Because I mean that perspective on life, his perspective on the marriage just must have just been shattered. So I think about that, and I realize obviously there's a lot to go into to what you went through, and we could talk about that forever. But look at it from Mark's perspective. I mean, it was really a life changer.
It really was. It set him into depression. He was more depressed than I was.
Hmm.
We went through counseling for a year for our depression, and he went on medication for a year for his depression. Um, Everything mentally had to be adjusted. It's not just the physical recovery, it's the mental attitude and the grief and the loss and the whole stages of grief that a person goes through. His character came right through, though, to see his commitment to the marriage. And we were told by my doctor, he got us together in the hospital, and he said, Rosemary and Mark, this is not going to be easy on your marriage. Most marriages fail. And I'm warning you now that you've got to do some things together to support your life. And
Hmm.
that's why counseling was so important to us, so that the marriage didn't fall apart. Mark was a person of character. The man I married never wavered in his commitment to say, it could have been me instead of you that was hit by that tree. He's lucky he wasn't hit too. He stopped in time and
Sure.
jumped off his bike because he had seen the tree halfway to the ground and warned me. So it could have been both of us, or it could have been him. And he said, I know that you would have done what I need to do for you, that you would have been my caregiver, my life support, my life partner, my soulmate. We married for life. And he never stopped. He never wavered. Never once did I have any hint that he wasn't going to do everything to make sure my life was taken care of.
Yeah, that is a huge testament to your marriage. I mean, incredible that not some people don't last through nothing, and there's sometimes where there is absolutely nothing that happens in a marriage and they still don't make it. So the fact that your marriage withheld and just went through all of that and got you to where you are today is absolutely amazing. I love that story.
Well, thank you.
25 years.
25 years of marriage.
Wow.
Yes.
So how long did it take you to accept your new life? I mean, obviously, you when the doctor came in and told you a little bit about what you're going to be experiencing, with the spinal cord injury and all that, that's one thing. But to really accept it, like, okay, so this is what I got to do. So this is the wheelchair that I got to use. This is the crutches that I've got to use, and however you get around. So how long did it take for you to get to that point?
Well, Brian, it's really a stage in a journey you go through every day. It's up and down emotions. Uh, First, denying that you're that injured and that they'll find a cure, and I'll be walking out of here in a couple of weeks. And then you realize you're out of the hospital 6 weeks later in a wheelchair, and you're bringing home all this adaptive equipment, and you're like, oh my gosh, the pain is excruciating. I have a rented hospital bed in my bedroom, and
Hmm.
it's real. It really hits you that you're in pain. You're going to have therapy for 2 years, 3 days a week. This is reality. So we go through those whole stages of grief and trying to figure out, is this something that I can live with? Is this worth living? This life that I now have, why would I want to continue in this capacity when everything seems worthless, hopeless?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of doubt going on whether life was worth living, and a lot of big turning points. One of them was reading a book by Viktor Frankl called Life's Search for Meaning. And at that point was a big turning point to say, if I loved Mark and I loved my family and all my friends, there was a journey that I had to take to continue to see where the recovery would end and work as hard as possible.
Hmm. Yeah, that's incredible. You've shared quotes with me that I've held on to. Focus on the hopeful future.
Yeah.
Another quote was that you shared with me was be relentlessly optimistic. So I have a little bit of slur in my talk. So I apologize for that.
Yes, Man's Search for Meaning is the correct title of that book. I may have misquoted it. By
Ah,
Viktor Frankl, a survivor in the German concentration camp.
mhm.
What a turning point that was when I read that book with a box of tissues by my bed, to really understand the reason for suffering and coming away with hope, that hope is all we have, and don't ever give up. It's amazing what has been my recovery and my journey when I look back and think, I never thought that I'd be able to, and just fill in the blank. The adaptions and modifications and the strength and recovery to make me very independent again, and a thriving house, a thriving marriage, a wonderful career ahead of me that's taken a huge direction down a path that I never would have gone down.
Yeah, I've a similar experience, but I'm so glad to hear you say that you're so happy with where your path is going as well. So, um, tell me, there's a lot there that I want to touch on, but tell me, you wrote a book yourself. more than one. But the one that I'm thinking about is Take Back Your Life. And I'm actually probably halfway through that book. It's still, I'm not a disciplined reader, but it still is a very, very good book. I appreciate all that you've put into it to help other people. So tell me a little bit about that book.
Well, that book is a collection of 20 articles. Brian, when I was in the hospital, one of my fellow NSA Ohio members said, Rosemarie, get a tape recorder and just start talking into this daily. You'll thank me later. And that's where these articles came from. When I got back home from the hospital, I had a lot of time on my hands. So I
Mhm.
started writing articles. I found a newspaper that wanted me to write an article every month chrono the journey. They wanted me to talk about what I was learning, what I was going through, and I started listening to those old recordings back when I was at Dodd Hall at the Ohio State University in rehab. So Take Back Your Life is a collection of 20 of the strongest articles. I had a committee reading all of the articles I had been writing, and they selected those 20 as the ones that they felt were most supportive and would help a journey to showcase the 2 years of my recovery right after the accident. So I start with the article of what happened on the bike trail. And the last article is going back to that bike trail on the second anniversary of the injury on my new bike. So I share 5 lessons that I lived by and I continue to live by to live with conviction. And that's where Take Back Your Life has its strong point. And those were my presentation points also. If anyone is interested, I have a TEDx speech, and Brian was my coach at that time for TEDx Hilliard. And I do talk about those 5 lessons that I live by, or 5 lessons that build my life again.
Yeah, that was a great speech. By all means, if you're listening, and again, if you're listening live, put in hashtag live. Let us know where you're coming in from. If you're listening on a replay, put in hashtag replay. And again, let us know where you're coming in from. And if there's ever anything that we can do for you to help you, if you're a caregiver or if you're a person with disabilities, I would love to be able to help you in any certain way that we can, whether it's advice or just putting you in contact with the right people. So Rosemarie is definitely one of those great people that you can be contacted by, but there's plenty of other people that can help as well. So don't feel as though you're alone. That's one thing I want to make sure that you understand, that the people that are listening, that you are not alone in what you're going through. So we've got somebody here that will be with you, that can help you, and we'll do that in the best way that we can. So thank you, Rosemarie. I appreciate that. Um, what would you say to those that are out there that maybe are wheelchair bound, that don't have the beautiful home that you have? And I love your home with all the different accessibility points that have been put into place there. But what would you say to someone that just doesn't have the resources to be able to do that?
Well, Brian, it doesn't always cost money to do some of these modifications. For those of you who aren't aware, I live in a home that's a national demonstration home and garden. My husband Mark and I were on the design team. We were the general contractors. We built this house and we've lived here since May of 2012. We share our home with you by virtual tour at our website at udll.com. That's the initials for the Universal Design Living Laboratory. So feel free to go there. You can download a free chapter of my Universal Design Toolkit. And I say that because it's a great tool for you to have that chapter as you take the virtual tour and you start to see the accessibility features, the universal design features that make life easier, that make the home accessible. And there may be some things you can do that are low cost or no cost. It's not necessary, possibly, to remodel a complete home. There might be some switches and changes in terms of some swing away hinges, for example, going to the hardware store with under $50 in your pocket and buying a set of hinges for your doorways to give you up to 5 more inches of clearance on some doors that now you can enter when you use a wheelchair or you use a walker for mobility. And
Hmm.
I don't want to look at myself as wheelchair bound. I don't like that term at all. I use a wheelchair for my mobility. It's my work vehicle. It is my independence. This is the replacement for my legs. So it's a different mindset of looking at a wheelchair as a accessory, as an aid, as a mobility device that gives you that freedom and independence that you need.
Oh, thank you. I stand corrected. That makes a lot more sense to view it that way. How do you think your life would look if you didn't have the Universal Design Living Lab?
Well, I would still be in the home that I was in at the time of the accident. We had built the home in 1995 when we were married, so we'd only lived there 3 years. So we would probably still be there if we hadn't figured out another solution. We were looking at homes that were on the market. We were looking at all kinds of remodeling possibilities, and economically it just didn't seem to work.
Hmm.
So building from scratch with all these sponsors, we could never have done it, Brian, without over 200 companies helped financially to support this. Granted, we have a huge mortgage on this home, buying the lot and getting the construction loan, but over 200 companies gave us services and products so that we could afford to build this home and to market all of our contributors that are listed on our website at udll.com. So
Hmm.
the limitation would have been tremendous. I was so frustrated in the other house in terms of reaching and access and even the carpeting in the house. It just was a wear and tear on my body and on my ability to be patient to get
Yeah.
things done.
Oh yeah, that must have been quite a challenge. So you mentioned UDLL.com quite a bit here. So I've changed the ticker from Rosemarie Speaks to UDLL.com. So people can have that to look at, and they can go to that website and view the toolkit that you have, and at least the first chapter. And then they can also talk about can they get to the Take Back Your Life book is there as well?
They can go to Amazon and order Take Back Your Life. That's available easily.
Okay. And are there other publications that you have?
Well, those are the two right now is the Universal Design Toolkit, and you can purchase that printed at Amazon if you would prefer a printed copy. If you prefer it digitally as a PDF, it comes with 4 hours of online videos and tours of our home. We have that at the universaldesigntoolkit.com, which is also accessible at udll.com. So your choice. You can buy the Universal Design Toolkit printed or digitally.
Oh, you've got it all.
Whatever
That's
you like.
great.
I'd be happy to get that to you. It's a great resource for those who are looking at design of a home to make that life easier for everyone. Universal design is for everyone, not just a person in a wheelchair.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. Well, that's good to know. Thank you. So I know we've already talked a little bit about Mark, but what a great guy. I mean, that's just incredible. Hopefully he can't hear us talking.
No, I'll
But
let him listen to the replay and tell him what a great man he is.
but can you tell us about a time where you had something you wanted, you needed maybe, but you just didn't want to trouble him or trouble somebody else to get that for you. So I think we all have these moments in time where we have something we want or we need, and we can't get it, or we were hoping it since somebody else was up, that they would be able to get this. But is there something else like that? Maybe a little more, well, whatever. Is there something like that you've been experienced?
Well, was totally like that when I got home from the hospital. I was just confined to the hospital bed in my own home. And so the way we communicated was with a small walkie talkie. So he had one, and he had his office in the second floor of our home.
Hmm.
Fortunately, our master bedroom and bath were on the first floor. So I was laying in bed and everything I needed. I had to have all of my bodily functions were not independent anymore. So Mark had to
Right.
come in. He also had to turn me in bed every 2 hours.
Hmm.
So I had a little bell that I would ring, and then I'd have the walkie-talkie by my bed to make sure I could get a hold of him, saying, "Mark, I'm really in pain. I need you. I need you now." And he would have to stay in the home and have that little walkie talkie on so that he knew I needed him. There were so many times. And
Hmm.
he never complained. He had to get up during the night every couple hours, too. It was like, "Mark, Mark, I need you." Or having more pain medicine in the early days. "Mark, it's breaking through. I need some more medicine."
Hmm.
Or "Fill a prescription. The doctor called this in. Go out tonight and go get it."
Really?
Anything for
Huh.
me. In
Wow.
fact, there's a funny story I share. He had a bathrobe that he wore, and it was a Calvin Klein, and it was embroidered on the label on the robe that he wore was Calvin Klein. So I used to tease him when he'd come to me during the night. I'd say, "Oh, Nurse Calvin, thank you for coming." So he's Nurse Calvin.
Uh,
But asking for help is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign that you know what you need. And so
yeah.
don't feel like you shouldn't be asking for help. Ask people for help, and it helps them feel needed. So it
Yeah.
gives them a sense of worth, and gives you, of course, the help you need. So don't hesitate. If you really need some help, get to the right people and let them know that you need their help, and they should feel better by being able to help.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that we don't want to ask for help because we don't want to inconvenience from someone. But you're right. Having them do something, having them help, makes them feel more useful. So that's important. Now, translate that back over to the caregiver, the person that's given the care. What would you want them to know? Obviously we're talking to the people with disabilities as well, but as a caregiver, what would you want them to know?
I want them to realize the pain that the patient is going through. They
Mhm.
can't comprehend the extreme pain and the extreme grief. There's so much going on. And so maybe they're used to um, a superficial understanding. They cannot feel what we're feeling. So they have to be more empathic and understanding. If we've only slept 2 hours that night and we can't move on this side because it hurts, and our fingers are still paralyzed and we can't feed ourselves, how humiliating it is, how embarrassing it is that we have to ask them to do things that they shouldn't have been able to do before, that are very private things. So understanding what we're feeling, um, in terms of physical and in terms of emotional, there's so much more to the caregiver's understanding.
Hmm. Well, that's yeah, that's important for us all to know, whether we're a caregiver or whether we're the person with the disability to understand. So, thank you for that. Yeah, we're about at our time. Believe it or not, it's really going by very very quickly. But tell us, what would you have? Or how would you leave it off with our guests, with our people that are listening in? What would you tell them in terms of whether the people with disabilities or the caregivers? What would you leave them with here today?
Well, being a caregiver myself, to my mother who lived to 98, to my brother who had a disability from birth, and to my father, I've had a lot of caregiving experience, going to the nursing homes every day and managing the caregivers that we had paid for many years. It is a grueling, grueling task, and people realize that they might have more than they thought to be able to tolerate it. You may be able to have the strength and the intellect. You just don't know what you've got as capacity. Move it forward hour by hour, day by day, and do what's needed to be those trusted family members and caregivers and be their voice.
Hmm. Well, those are great words to live by. Thank you so much for joining us today. I truly appreciate your time.
Oh, you're welcome. It's been a privilege. Thanks so much, Brian.
Well, thank you, and we'll see you soon. I'll hang back around the green room, and I'll come and see you here in a minute.
All right.
All right. Thank
Bye.
you. All right. Bye. Ah, what a great talk with Rosemarie Rossetti. How about that? Phenomenal. She is absolutely phenomenal. I'll tell you, we need to get more people like her on this show because, and we do. We do have more people like her coming on this show. So we're going to have, next week, we're going to have a gentleman by the name of Tom Shovelton. And Tom is going to be coming on. He has a daughter with autism, and I believe she's nonverbal. We'll talk to him a little bit more about that when he comes on. But I can't tell how excited I am to have Tom come on. But that's next Friday. In the meantime, we do have our Vision Alignment shows, which air every day at 10 o'clock. So 10 o'clock Eastern. And if you'll join us for those, we're going to have some. Monday we're off, but then Tuesday we have Sam Richter. Wednesday we have Ryan Campbell. So a huge number of people that are coming on these shows to help us to understand vision alignment and understanding that our core beliefs, our core values need to match up with our vision. So, and align with our vision. So that is important for us all to understand. Hopefully you can join us for those meetings. And if there's ever anything else that I can do for you, please don't hesitate to let me know and let Roxanne or Rosemarie know as well. Thank you so much. I appreciate all of you. And as always, keep one eye on the road.